Assalamu alaikum dear students. Hope you all doing well. Today we are going to discuss about biogeochemical cycles. First of all, let's try to understand what biogeochemical cycles are. Biogeochemical cycles, we can define them as the constant flow of different substances between biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem. That means in biogeochemical cycles, we actually study how different substances, be it an element or a compound, how these substances are transferred from the abiotic component to the biotic component and from the biotic component back to the abiotic component. सिंपलर वर्ड्स में हम डिफाइन कर सकते हैं बायोजियोकेमिकल साइकिल्स को, किस तरह से डिफरेंट सब्सटेंसेस जो हैं ट्रांसफर हो जाते हैं फ्रॉम एबायोटिक कंपोनेंट टू द बायोटिक कंपोनेंट और बायोटिक कंपोनेंट से वापस एबायोटिक कंपोनेंट में. We can say, when we try to understand what biotic and abiotic components are, biotic components includes all the living organisms in the ecosystem and abiotic component includes all the non-living things of the ecosystem. Biotic component includes all the living organisms, be it a microorganism, plant or an animal, and abiotic components, the most important of the abiotic components are water, air and soil. So in biogeochemical cycles, we are going to discuss about how this different substances are transferred from the abiotic components, that's air, water and the soil, to the biotic component of the ecosystem, that's the living organisms, and from the living organisms back to the non-living component. So in this chapter, we have to discuss about 4 such biogeochemical cycles, that's water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle and oxygen. We are already done with the water cycle, and in this lecture we will try to discuss about the nitrogen cycle. When we talk about nitrogen, it's the most abundant gas in our atmosphere and it makes up to around 78% of the total atmosphere. और जब हम atmosphere की बात करते हैं, this is the abiotic component of the ecosystem. And when we talk about the living organisms या biotic component of the ecosystem, जो nitrogen होता है, it's present as a part of important biomolecules like proteins and nucleic acids. Nucleic acids में DNA और RNA आता है, which is present inside our cells. So in nitrogen cycle, we are going to discuss how this nitrogen from the atmosphere means atmosphere is the abiotic component of the ecosystem, how this nitrogen is transferred from this atmosphere into the living organisms and from the living organisms back to the atmosphere. When we talk about this nitrogen in the atmosphere, it's present in its elemental form, that's N2, and living organisms cannot consume this nitrogen in its elemental form. So there are some bacteria which are present either in the root nodules of legumes, or some of them are free living or symbiotic, in a symbiotic relation with the root nodules of legumes. So they convert this atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. This process is called as nitrogen fixation. That means by the process of nitrogen fixation, this atmospheric nitrogen which is present in the elemental form, that's N2, this N2 is converted into ammonia. And this process is called a nitrogen fixation. After that, this ammonia, this is converted into nitrites and nitrates. And again, there are some bacteria which are called as nitrifying bacteria, which help in this conversion of ammonia into nitrites and nitrates. And this process is called as nitrification. So in the process of nitrification, ammonia is converted into nitrites and nitrates by various nitrifying bacteria. And then these nitrates are then absorbed by the plants. And plants use this nitrogen which is present in the nitrates in the formation of proteins and nucleic acids, and this process is called as assimilation. This process is called as assimilation. And then these plants are consumed by different animals. This is how this atmospheric nitrogen is transferred to the biotic component, that's the living organisms of the ecosystem. पहले atmospheric nitrogen को by the process of nitrogen fixation convert किया ammonia में, and this process is done by various nitrogen fixing bacteria. After that, this ammonia is converted into nitrites and nitrates by some nitrifying bacteria, and this process is called as nitrification. After that, these nitrates are absorbed by the plants and they use this nitrogen for the formation of proteins and nucleic acids, and this process is called as assimilation. उसके बाद plants को consume करते हैं different animals, and when these animals, they first of all they release various waste products in which nitrogen is present, for example urea. And after that, when these plants and animals die, there are some bacteria, microorganisms like bacteria and fungi, which are called as decomposers. They convert this nitrogen back into the ammonia, and this process is called as ammonification. So ammonification में क्या होता है, जो dead plants और dead animals होते हैं या इनके waste products जो होते हैं, इनमें जो नाइट्रोजन प्रेजेंट होता है उसको वापस कन्वर्ट करते हैं डिकम्पोजर्स इनटू अमोनिया, और इस प्रोसेस को हम अमोनिफिकेशन कहते हैं. And after that, this ammonia is back by the process of nitrification. It's again converted into nitrites and nitrates. There are some other bacteria which are called as denitrifying bacteria. Which are also present in the soil, and they convert these nitrates into the atmospheric nitrogen. That's the elemental form of the nitrogen. That means they convert these nitrates back into the atmospheric nitrogen, and this process is called as denitrification. So denitrification is conversion of nitrates back into the atmospheric nitrogen by various denitrifying bacteria. तो इस तरह से जो नाइट्रोजन प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स में होता है by the help of denitrifying bacteria, ये नाइट्रोजन वापस एटमॉस्फेयर में चला जाता है, और एटमॉस्फेयर से वापस नाइट्रोजन फिक्सिंग बैक्टीरिया की मदद से ये वापस पहुंच जाता है लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स में. So this is how this nitrogen cycle works. This is how this nitrogen is transferred from the abiotic component, that's the atmosphere, into the soil by some nitrogen fixing bacteria, and from the soil it's absorbed by plants, and plants are consumed by animals. When these plants and animals die, decomposers convert this nitrogen back into ammonia, and again nitrification, by the process of nitrification this ammonia is converted into nitrates, and there are some denitrifying bacteria which convert these nitrates back into the atmosphere. That's the elemental form of the nitrogen, that's N2, and this process is called as denitrification. So we came to know about certain terms like ammonification, first of all nitrogen fixation, then nitrification, then assimilation, then ammonification and denitrification. Nitrogen fixation is conversion of this atmospheric nitrogen into the ammonia. Nitrification is conversion of ammonia into the nitrates, and assimilation is when these nitrates are absorbed by the plants and utilized in the formation of proteins and nucleic acids. And denitrification is when these nitrates are converted back into the elemental form of nitrogen by some denitrifying bacteria. So this is how this nitrogen cycle works. So this is it for now. Thank you.